Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Starting a Counseling Practice podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Miranda Palmer from Zinni-Me, and we have the amazing Amy Buccieri sharing her story of starting a counseling practice. Amy, thanks for being here today.
Oh, this is so fun. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I always like to start these podcasts with the same question for everybody, and it's a really hard one, which is like, in a minute or less, why did you decide to become a therapist?
I feel like it was, in all disclosure, it's kind of like the only thing I really knew that I'd be able to do that would be able to, that like I could do it. I knew that inside of myself, and I knew there was a place to put that in the world so that it would be useful to other people. So it felt like there was a real congruity there, you know. Other kind of things I think about, like, oh, I want to be a performer or an academic or whatever. Like that was a lot harder to figure out how to put that into the external world in such a way that it would allow me to eat for the rest of my life. So, you know, I early on when I was thinking about the academic thing, I saw an article somewhere that I remember. This was like a flashbulb moment, and I was like, okay, and we're done with this now. There was an opening for a tenure track position in anthropology at Columbia University, and they had 800 applicants. And I was like, I don't know if this is really going to feed me, because I'm not that good. You know, like I'm just not that good. So let's you know, so let's do what it is I know I can't do. So here we are.
And that you have more control over than that space of, you know, it's kind of like, here's this academia space of, you have to kind of go through all of these kind of checkpoints, and some of these are political and some of these are bureaucracy and relational kind of stuff, versus really as a therapist, we get to, I know sometimes we're like, I don't want to, but like we get to put ourselves out into the world directly.
Bingo.
And we've always been able to do that. And I love that about
even just hearing you say this, you're like, oh, and there's the bureaucracy and the politics and I could just feel this like brown, sad goo in my heart at the thought of being within like that structure that has its own agenda, right? Like when we work in a bureaucracy, it has its own agenda, and that agenda may not necessarily be helping clients, bettering our communities, taking care of ourselves over the long term. It has like its own goals, and we have to kind of bend to that when we work in those big systems. And I didn't really put that together until later, which is why I think I'm still doing it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay. So what age did you realize that you wanted to be a therapist? Was that like from the beginning, or was it something you kind of stumbled onto later?
Yeah, so that would have been about, I'm going to say it was like 14.
You're early like me. Like, that's really early to like.
Yeah, it was like right around puberty, and I'm like, I need to figure out how to do this. And I started volunteering at that summer at like a YMCA camp. I'm like, okay, that's something I can do at 14. Or I remember I couldn't drive. Like my mom had to drive me off. So I was like 14 or 15 when I did that. Yeah. So this like has always been in the works.
Yeah.
And I've tried. I cannot even, I don't know, maybe if I I should have listed these, how many different things I've tried and been like, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do this. I could be an anthropologist, and I'll be an opera singer, and I'll be, I don't know, volcanologist. I mean, whatever. But this is always what I came back to. And like I said, it started at like 14.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So how long from the time that you started college until finishing up your degree, how long did that take for you?
So I did the typical college, 18 to 22. And then I went back to grad school at, I'm an MSW. And I went back to grad school, I think at 26. Yeah, I went back to grad school 26. And I started in a counselor ed program. And that ended up just not being the right match for me. And then I transferred to an MSW program, finished up there in 2008. just when the Great Recession was happening, was when I finished. So I finished my undergrad when the tech bubble burst in 2000. And I finished grad school during the Great Recession in 2008. So getting my feet back on the ground after grad school like took a minute. Like a lot of places weren't hiring. It was hard to find a position. I'm still at that point. I'm still looking to like get licensed and build my hours and do all that kind of stuff. So then I got my license August of, let me think about this. When was that? Like, it would have been like August of 2011, I think.
Okay.
Was when I got my license. So I was like 33, 32, something like that.
3 years, which in the midst of the Great Recession, that's not too bad.
That's not too bad. Yeah. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been a lot worse. Yeah.
And then how long did it take you to realize like, I really want to do, or like, I'm ready to start my private practice from the point that you were licensed?
Oh, that was I took a very, very conservative road. And this is also like part of my story that may resonate with some people, that I think I can do it, but not yet, right? That's like a tagline. I don't know. It's like a bumper sticker or something in my like spiritual life. I think I can do it, but not yet. So I got licensed in 2011 and promptly got laid off. So the couple of years that I was at that agency getting my licensure hours, now to be fair, like during the job interview, they told me that this was a pilot program that I was going into, and it may not be around forever. I was a mobile therapist in geriatrics. Yeah. So they decided to start this, but they didn't really have a way to fund it. Yeah. And they didn't figure it out in the 2 years that I was, in a couple of years I was doing it. So they were like, all right, we're going to lay you off. You can go and work in the mental health, like the standard sort of like mental health clinic that we have here at this nonprofit, community mental health nonprofit. It was actually much bigger than just mental health, but I said, you can do that if you want. This is a position that's open, or we'll lay you off. And I was like, I'm going to take the layoff and go and work in a group practice now that I have my license. So, this was one of the moments that obviously I was in the right place, the right time, doing the right thing, because the group practice I fell in with was a lovely, lovely place to work. Not everybody gets that experience in group practices, I realized afterward. But it was great. I'm still friends with the office manager. Her husband would like make all the clinicians chili for lunch once a month. Like it was just a really clinician-centered place. It was run by a psychiatrist. There were 2 other part-time psychiatrists there, and somewhere from like 6 to 8 different clinicians working part-time or more hours or whatever. Very flexible. I learned a lot. I find that going from community health to private practice would have been a much steeper learning curve. So to go from community health to a private practice, like outpatient group practice, was great experience. So I understood documentation better. I understood my own clinical style better. I learned things about like how to collaborate with psychiatrists, especially when you're referring to like higher levels of care. So it was actually a really, really good experience. Yeah. And they let me decrease my load there as I was increasing my load under my own practice. So the day came that it was just an easy step over into full-time private practice for me. And I stayed longer than I think I should have, I realized in retrospect. But I went into private practice full-time for myself in the fall of 2014.
Awesome. So really even that, a couple of years, like to like, and it sounds like in a way that felt really good for your nervous system.
Very good for that's a right way to put it. It felt really good for my nervous system.
Really good for your nervous system like, let me learn and let me just slowly transition until it's a no-brainer. And like, there's no, like where your boss is like, why are you still here? Like, you
exactly. And in those couple of years when I was working in the group and I was seeing, whoever came into the group, it was sort of a general practice group, somewhat higher acuity maybe, because the psychiatrist who was the head of the practice was also the chair of the psychiatry department in a nearby hospital. So it was probably a slightly higher acuity. During that time, I was developing my specialty. So I was in all my trainings and whatever to become So I'm a certified Imago couple therapist, and I'm a certified sex therapist, ASEX certified sex therapist. I'm also now, since that time, EMDR certified, and I'm a certified sex therapy supervisor. So I can help other people get their certification. But getting the couples therapy and the sex therapy down while I was at the group practice, it just became obvious to everybody that I needed to kind of do my own thing because those skills weren't going to be well utilized in the group.
Yeah, awesome. So tell me what your practice looks like today.
So my practice is steady for sure. So like on the business side, my best guesstimate, I should have looked this up too, so I'm sorry about this. My best guesstimate is that I probably take about 15 to 20% of the people who request appointments with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing that consistently for years. It's interesting. When I went from insurance to private pay, that percentage actually didn't change, which really kind of surprised me. So I'm always there's always a lot more interest than I can actually accommodate. Even over COVID, when I like added extra slots, I still, it's still about 15 to 20%. I have a lot of long-term clients or somebody I see in a couple of days. And he and I have been working together since, I think, 2012. Yeah, so we just had we have like our 11-year anniversary. So I think of client retention as being, and also return clients, right, as being a big part of my business. Like the longer I do this, the more people will say like, okay, we dealt with this thing that we had to deal with, thank you. And then they come back a few years later, something else emerges that they want to deal with. And that always feels like a great compliment. And that's another thing that the longer I'm in practice, the more like, I don't know, repeat customers.
Well, I think the more like self-sustaining, the more you have not just what's coming from your website, but like these are already the people that you're working with. And I think there's something beautiful too, in that I can hear like, yeah, there's long-term people, but there's also where okay, it's time to graduate.
Yes.
I think people underestimate how powerful it is to graduate your clients, to make sure that they really understand the progress that they've made and let them come back when they're ready to work versus having people just in there the entirety. Because I think sometimes it can get very stale, and it also can give people like it can actually inhibit clinically, and it can inhibit your private practice growth.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think I have I notice working with couples, there's a lot more clarity, I think, around episodes of care. It's just been sort of my, observation. And it's great, right? As a couple and sex therapist, couples will come in and things shift, and then they have a baby, and then they take some time off, right? And then they come back and they're like, oh God, now we're parents. Now we don't know what to do. And then we figure that out. So the episodes,
they have tweens, and then they have teens, and then
exactly. So as all of those things kind of change over time and their needs change, they take time away and can come back, and that feels like a really nice compliment, right? That I have people who can circle back. So
it's a compliment, but it's also like people are getting good care consistently.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully they're not just coming back out of obligation.
That's my hope. That's weird. That'd be so weird. Yeah.
Well, it'd be really insulting if we didn't call her. She'll somehow know that like we went to a different couples therapist to work on this other issue.
Right, exactly. And I have referred people to other couple therapists too. Like maybe we're not a good match, or this would be somebody who would be helpful. So I try really hard to be open about that as well with people, because I know I'm not always a good match, 100%.
Yeah. Now, is your private practice your only gig? Do you have multiple streams of income? Like what does your life look like?
Well, yes and no. So I am in a long-term relationship, and I don't know, he's considered a stream of income, I'm not sure. But I'm definitely the breadwinner in the family. But I'm not the only income in the house. I also have over time I've done some, like I said, supervision, right, to
Mhm.
supervise people to become certified sex therapists. I found that that's something I want to work in a very particular kind of way that I haven't quite massaged, because I find that I just don't get kind of the satisfaction, I don't think, out of like a conventional sort of supervision relationship that other people do.
Yeah.
Because I see like some of my supervisors, they love it. And I
Yeah.
don't feel that way. So I'm like, all right, how can I make this work? So
Yeah.
my goal is to kind of craft that into just sort of ways that I can issue short-term CEs or supervision hours to people, maybe doing like a retreat or a workshop or something, because I feel like that would be a better match for me. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of playing with ways to still use that supervision credential. I actually just came from a cup of coffee with somebody, and we're going to start exploring retreats, doing
Mhm.
retreats for people together. So super exciting.
Mhm.
She's also an Imago certified couple therapist, so it's a good match. She's super great. Kim Sapp, awesome, look her up. And I also, just because I called him up one day and said, hey, I want to do this, how can we figure it out? I teach CEs through a group practice in my area in Pittsburgh that's really big, but he's working on a national reach. So I teach CEs under his umbrella for therapists about sex therapy, like intro to sex therapy kind of thing. It's been fun. I've done it several times, and that's pretty good. I mean, that I've done it several times. I think this year will be my fourth round. And that at this point is coming down to earning me about $1,000 an hour.
Yeah. That's
So
fantastic.
working on more options. I keep going back and forth about like, do I want to buy a rental property? Verdict is still out, but I do appreciate how the entrepreneurial kind of demand of being somebody in private practice has really pushed me to think about these things in ways I never would have before. And it helps me actually, as much as sometimes being on my own can feel risky, but it's kind of forced me to take on responsibility for taking care of myself in a way I wouldn't have otherwise. So I think in some ways, maybe it seems risky, but it's forced me to do the work to keep myself extra safe, I'd say.
Oh, I love that. I think that there are so many of us who are not taught financial safety. We weren't taught financial planning. We were taught almost a little bit of like a codependence in terms of what
That's a good word.
happens with employers. And so we get into these unhealthy relationships, and then we go, well, I remember working at the county, and I came from a nonprofit, so I came to the county and I'm like, this is great. Like compared to the nonprofit, like I'm getting great
Sure.
benefits. Like,
Yeah.
I'm making twice as much per hour that I was making at the nonprofit. Like, this seems fantastic. And people are like,
Yep.
this is horrible. And then when I went into private practice, people were like, how are you going to do this? Like, it's going to be so, unsafe. What if something happens? You won't have an income. And then my private practice, and I actually opened it during the Great Recession, right? In 2007, 2008, I did it. It actually like legitimately flourished.
That's
While
awesome.
my coworkers at the county were getting furloughed and their benefits were coming down. And
Oh.
all of these other financial things were happening where like they had their job, but suddenly their job like completely changed. Their income changed versus for me, I was able to keep moving my income up. And then when my former spouse, like he got laid off during the Great Recession, then I doubled down on what I was doing with my business and realized, oh, I could just see a couple more people per week. I could just raise my fees a little bit to take care of the benefits. And it was such an empowering experience.
Yes.
It really was empowering. And I think especially even at like watching, like I had a parent, a mom, or I have a mom, let me be clear, but when we were growing up, that she had like a craft business and she never really like took to learning how to run a business. So it was just this very crazy thing that didn't bring any money in it. It was just this like cycling piece. So I hadn't seen what it looked like to see a successful woman. And she's always very dependent on other people.
Totally.
So it felt just so empowering. Like,
yes. And I mean, I'm from Pittsburgh. It's a union town. It was a steel town that lost its identity like shortly before I was born in the mid 70s. I was born in the late 70s, just I want to say those extra couple of years. But the steel industry fell in the mid 70s.
I'm the elder.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And my dad wasn't in the steel industry, but he was always in the union, right? So there were strikes and people getting laid off, and just like, how does this work? And like you said, like, you didn't really have an example. I didn't know how any of this worked. My mom was a homemaker. My dad was a union guy. So was everybody around me. And I really didn't get it. But I can say that some part of it, maybe subconsciously, I don't know, but my supervisors, as I've learned to become a therapist, people I've hired as consultants, supervisors, depending on what word we use, was so empowering to see a woman who could say, like, I'm going to figure out how to take care of myself and my family, and I'm savvy and I know what I'm doing, and I'm not afraid, and I don't feel guilty, and I don't feel like it's not okay to take, like, it's okay to take care of myself. And I learned that really from my supervisors in this work, specifically Gail Gutman in the Washington, D.C. area, who is an amazing person, an amazing businesswoman, a fabulous clinician. And I feel so grateful for her example. Because I wouldn't have gotten it anywhere else. But this community of I do find that in the therapy world, I find women doing pretty amazing things that I just hadn't seen otherwise.
Yeah. And I love that you were connected in with the community, because I've seen both dynamics. And I think especially with women, I've seen women in communities where it's this very big thing of, well, oh yes, I do this thing, and I do sliding scale to give back, and I do this and pay what you can. And you find out more, and you go, oh, and you find out, oh, their income is the side income. Their spouse is running the household, and their income pays for a vacation every year, or to read the kitchen, or whatever the thing is. It's not the sustaining piece of it. And so it's a very interesting space. And even I've heard of so many people, right, through our business school, I get to hear all the great stories and then all the terrible stories of people, seeing somebody in the hall, and they say, oh, I was going to refer someone over here. Oh, hey, what's your fee? And they just say, oh, it's, $165 or $225 or whatever the number is.
Sure.
So I love that you were tapped into a community like that. Modeling is, like, I think we underestimate it.
I think you're right. I think that's right. And I still look for that, because in my market here in Pittsburgh, very, very, very few people are direct pay. And so it still feels like often an uphill battle. So staying in connection with other people who value, I don't know, like working for the client, not working for the third party payer. It's hard, right? And that's really why, part of the reason for sure, like my motivation is I don't want to work for the insurance company. I'm here to work for a client. And also, as I will say too, my sex therapy specialty is often not covered by insurance, which is, just as what it is. We can have a whole conversation.
We could have a whole conversation about that. Or again, the fact that in 2020, in the midst of a global pandemic, the health insurance companies in the United States made more money than Amazon, and Amazon had their best year ever. Like, it's not just we're working for the insurance company, we are helping the insurance companies have exorbitant amounts of profit, while therapists are often sitting going, why can't I afford to get my own therapy? Or wait, I can't afford to buy my own health insurance. Like something's broken in the system. So the more that we can stand and say, you know what, everybody gets to make their own choice, but for me, this is what I choose.
Yeah.
It, it allows for good services. So
no, that's really, I also want to say, in terms of people I admire, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this, that the first time I had a touch with you guys, and I don't know if you and Kelly were even business partners, I don't know how long you guys have been doing this, but many moons ago, Melissa Hall had an online summit. Do you remember that? Was that like 14 or something? 13? Like that was like 10 years ago.
So we've been around longer than Melissa Hall had the summit. So I think it was about like 10 years ago.
I think it's about 10 years ago.
But yeah, we helped Melissa Hall develop her QA prep. Like she wasn't sure what she wanted to do when she came to us. So we've been around since I think it's 2010. So I think we're on year 13.
Happy anniversary. That's amazing. That's amazing. But that was the first exposure I had to Melissa and to Roy Huggins and to Kelly. And I remember, I don't think you were speaking at that summit. I know Kelly did. I didn't think you did. Yeah. Okay. And a handful of other people that I was like, wait a minute, there's actually people out there who've like figured this out. And it sounds like what they're doing is something that is like sustainable. That feels like my catchword. Like, is this really something I can do over the long term? And everybody was talking about a way to have a practice that really felt good for the long term. Yeah. And it blew my mind. It was so helpful. It was so helpful. But that was my first touch with you guys all those years ago. Right. So it feels kind of, I'm so glad to be able to tell you thank you. Like, that's so great. Pass that on to Kelly. I'm so grateful.
I will. I think that the piece is, I think, for most of us, we're going to school full time, and then sometimes we're working full time, we're gathering hours, and we get into this space of overwork that starts to feel normal. Like you talked about your dad being a union guy. My dad did heavy equipment. He was part of the operating engineers, and it was, you got to work when you can get it. Right?
Totally.
Like, this is how it is. So that 60, 70 hour work week, like, just kept going. And that dynamic of going, oh, wait, like my body is shutting down. Like, this isn't just for a minute, like something else is happening. Like for me, it looked like autoimmune disorder kind of stuff popping up in my body, but it looks different for everybody. And then sitting and looking and going, oh, wait, everyone that I've modeled they're all working 60, 70 hours a week around me. Of course, I'm going to do that. I'm teaching and I'm doing clinical supervision. I'm teaching for 2 or 3 different schools and the free flyer. And I'm also doing, this other thing, or the county in my private. It was just so much. And to sit down and to go, wait, would I want this for my client? Like for my therapy client, I would say, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense.
Totally.
So can I really live out, this other piece? I think it's a beautiful, it's just such a beautiful scenario of how we can really take our own learnings and create a community around us to change the story. And then to expand the story out of there. Melissa was actually one of the first people that went through our business school. And then there are people like Nicole Stoller-Peterson that does therapist court prep. And there's like 1,000 names like swirling through my head, but I'm terrible with names. But it's a funny thing of how all these people are now out in the world training other therapists.
Yeah.
And it just warms my heart, that place of when you bring people together and you create something that's shifting and new and different, and that really resonates with people from a heart space. It really does change the landscape.
And and I think everybody can benefit, right? Clients benefit, the therapist benefits, the advisor benefits, everybody can benefit. And we don't always, that doesn't always, it certainly didn't always feel that way when I was working under insurance.
Yeah.
Like the number of conversations I have with people, and I'm not looking to slam on people who are carrying insurance, but it's really complicated. And anybody who's done it knows that. Like, all right, so I have to go and like do this little thing because there's these like rules and guidelines and timelines and requirements and all this. Like it takes a big chunk out of my energy because managing that type of work, that's sort of like quality assurance or regulation adherence
kind of bureaucracy, right? Going back
and all the bureaucracy. Yeah, seriously. Like all of that feels like it's like a job description in and of itself.
It is. I have to interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
Hilarious. I don't know if you've seen psychotherapy memes.
I don't think so.
D'Arts, I forget how I say her last name, but psychotherapy memes on Instagram is fantastic. And she's like, anytime and again, I'm horribly paraphrasing it. It was like, every time I don't believe in myself, I just think about how I must be awesome because, and she name drops like 3 insurance companies that they believe I can cure severe depression in 3 sessions. I was just like, yes.
I love it. That's hilarious.
I shared it on Instagram, and I actually have a friend, an amazing friend, but he's in like the high ups of one of the insurance companies, and he like responded. But I was like, hey, this is
that's so funny.
What are we doing?
Sometimes I think therapists can be so funny. I would totally be down with going to like a therapist comedy like festival, because I've known people who do like improv, and to see some therapists who are also stand-up comics would like totally make my day. I don't know who those people are, but like
I know one person who actually like went and performed. There's a therapist, Jessin Prada. She's in Southern California.
I'm gonna write her down.
I bet we could like find some, and she did it for a while now. She's into pickleball, but I wonder if we talk to Jess.
Now she's into pickleball.
She got injured, so maybe she'll be telling us.
All right, maybe it's her coming out of retirement. All right, that'd be good. I would love that. I would love it.
So let's talk a little bit as we kind of near the end. Like, what are some things in private practice that you are like struggling, or what's next for you in private practice? You remember our business school, we were kind of talking before about like some like reminders of how we could help with whatever's next. Because, sometimes people join and then you don't look at it for a while and you don't even know all the things we've added. So I thought it'd be fun for us to dive into what's next and give you a little mini coaching session.
Yeah, that'd be great. So before we recorded, right, we talked a little bit about my website, which I'm looking to redo. Yeah. But another thing that's on my horizon, and any kind of, this would be so great. Like I've been doing this for a while, like I've been licensed now about almost a dozen years. I have my niche, my specialty. I have a good reputation. I hope, it seems to in the community. I enjoy marketing. Like I feel like that those kind of wheels are moving along pretty well, but I do keep thinking about what would it be like for me to envision a group practice?
Ooh.
Yeah. And I really think about a group practice like in a very niche kind of way.
Yeah.
For a long time, I think I felt scared off from it because I think kind of what I do is maybe so niche. It would be hard to find people who are qualified, but I have some other ideas, like people who are doing therapy that's sort of in that, this is how I've been thinking about it. It's sort of in that space between like evidence-based PubMed and like sunning your perineum and goop. You know what I mean? Like, so, no disrespect to anybody who wants to, worship the sun god in that way. However, I just, safety first, I guess, is my only ask.
Gosh, we're gonna have.
You're gonna do that, Miranda. You don't have to share it. You can keep it.
This is fantastic. This is gonna be the quote for this episode. It's somewhere between evidence-based PubMed and sunning your perineum. I'm so stoked about it. Like
I'm so glad that's well received. I really wasn't sure how that was gonna land.
No, I love it. I'm over here like, this is a podcast. You can't see me with my arms up in the air. I'm so excited. Yep, this is going on a quote. We're doing this for sure.
Oh, perfect. That feels
yeah.
very congruent with who I believe myself to be. So I think that there is a space in there, right, where we talk about things that are, we can all recognize, like, there are some limitations to the most conventional forms of therapy. We've all, by the time we're probably at this point in private practice, we've run into various kinds of head scratchers in terms of our blocks. But then I also think most of us are going to say, but I don't think like aromatherapy is going to fix it either. You know, like that's not the thing that's going to fix it. So what's happening in what I'm starting to think of in my own mind in this therapy 2.0 space, right? That is maybe more based on the experiential evidence in the moment, as opposed to like a double-blind, top-down kind of injection of data. What kind of practices are doing that kind of work? And maybe it's because some of those kinds of practices or clinical approaches just don't have the research body built up yet. I think that's true for a lot of things. And maybe because of the politics of getting that in place, that's not always going to happen. Right? That may not always happen. People ask me questions about sexuality as a sex therapist. They ask me questions about sexuality all the time. Like, I don't know, something like, at what age do people like stop masturbating or something? I'm like, there will never be research money to know that answer. I'm really sorry. Like, I wish I could give you some information about these things, but that we're never going to know.
When they die.
When they die. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So we can certainly, right. Whatever the question, I know there's better questions than that. Those are the only thing that fell into my head. But, you know, there are a lot of pieces of data we're just never going to get to. But does that mean it's not important? I wouldn't say that's true either. So these are the kind of things I'm thinking of. So
okay. So a couple things. So since you joined business school, right?
Yes.
A while ago. We actually have not just our website of exactly how to build and what to write on each page and how to write it in a way that really makes sense for you.
Yeah.
But we actually have a template that is there, so that is a starting point that you can put all the material in.
Great.
And what we found is that if you line out and get that content in, and then you give that to a designer, if you want to invest in a designer, your website is going to be more converting and it's going to be a much better experience. Most people start with a design and then they come back and try to give the content to fit into the design. And that design doesn't necessarily support the words. Now, you can have an ugly website with great words and you can bring clients in. But if you have a beautiful website with not the best words, you are not going to bring clients in, right?
Okay, that makes sense. I can understand that.
So we really believe in content first, and that the design supports the content. Yeah, maybe you need to be massaged and maybe like, oh, make this more concise. This is too wordy here or whatever, like shorten this tagline. Like there'll be tweaks, but start one to the other first. And that's how we teach you inside of the business school. And we've broken up our website module, and it's much easier to kind of go page by page through the writing. We've revamped, which is great. And then of course, we're also teaching you how to go in and make sure that the analytics are in there so that we can look at the data, because the amount of times that somebody puts a new website up and then something changes and they're like, oh wait, no one's coming, like what's happening? And they don't know, is this because my SEO dropped? Sometimes web designers, they will just give you a beautiful website and they'll strip out all of your search engine optimization because that's not included in a web design package. So we make sure that you're looking at all aspects of, yes, there's the pretty, there's the content, and there's the SEO. We need all of these things in flow for your website to do what it wants to do. Now, this other part in terms of the group practice, which is really exciting, especially hearing that there's, you know, hey, I'm taking 20% of who's calling me right now.
For years.
And the website's going to do two things. One is that we can actually create the website so that it's more clear who you really want to work with. so that we could actually reduce the amount of inquiries. So you're spending less time navigating the 80% that are not appropriate for you. And attract more of the people that you want. And then, so we can save some time in terms of all the referral out kind of stuff and point people in the right direction. Or again, if a lot of these could be appropriate, or if we could look at this data in terms of who you might want to hire for this 80%. Some of this 80%, like they shouldn't contact you. Like they're just not appropriate.
True.
And then some of these people could be served by other people within your organization, and you can decide who fits in this broader umbrella. And so we have a group practice roadmap that takes you step by step through moving your practice into a group practice. And this is all with your lifetime membership in business school. Like it's all there for you. Our next intensive working session where Kelly and I and we actually have more coaches now too to support.
Congratulations.
I know, very exciting.
So great.
We're all there October 6th. It'll be 2 intensive weeks where we're in answering questions, making you videos, going over your website with you, helping you rewrite copy, whatever you need for those 2 weeks. We're there for that.
Awesome.
Right?
Awesome.
If your timeline doesn't align with that and you want to do something else, we do have some other coaching options we could talk about. But like ultimately, I think that's the space. If you haven't been logged in a little while, you just email help@zennyme.com because we did move it a couple of years ago over to Mighty Networks. It has a little app so you can access everything from your phone, which is really nice. And all the communities in there, we don't do any of the community stuff on Facebook anymore. Like we hate Facebook. We don't want you seeing ads while you're trying to get coaching and silly stuff.
Okay, fair enough.
So we pulled everything off of there. So I think for me, I definitely say before you invest in anything else in terms of your group practice or the website, come back to this like centering place. You have access to it. Like, let's dig in there and then we can figure out if you need more support. But we have so many group practices that have gone through our process and it's like everything is in there. How to get your employee manual, how to do hiring job descriptions, offer letters, firing people, performance improvement plans, like how much to pay them. I know you had even mentioned that idea of like, oh, I'm looking at raising my fees a little bit. So we have our calculator has expanded in like a crazy sort of way. And it's actually, it can move from your individual to get really clear on what your fee can be. And then it expands into the group practice calculator on how to calculate how much to pay your employees.
Oh, that's great. Because
that
feels very
everything.
Yeah, that feels very beyond me right now and I realize moving forward, I've heard, as I'm sure we all have, it's probably why it's in there, right? I've heard so many horror stories, right? About people who have group practices and even people who are really good at it. Like, let's be fair, like it is still a risk. You know, I've heard stories about embezzlement. I've heard multiple stories about embezzlement, actually fraud. One woman who had a really well-respected, beautiful, amazing group practice for 7 years decided to close it. And I called her up because I wanted to talk to her about it. Like, what happened? Like, you were doing so great. And she's like, well, at the end of the day, I realized I was making about $5 an hour doing this because and she's like, I can't live like that.
The amount of people who are paying their employees to work there, meaning if they were just doing solo practice, they would make more money.
Yes.
They are making while they're working more, like the amount of times that happens. And that's why we integrated it into business school. We didn't think it would be, we're just like, oh, we'll do this business school. And then we didn't think like, oh, we're going to do this for group practice in particular. And then of course, all our people start expanding. So we just have expanded over time because we want people taken care of.
That's great. It's great. And I've just heard so many stories about missteps and mistakes and worries and court cases and all kind of stuff, that the fact that I don't have to kind of start from scratch feels like it makes my little heart relax. Thank you to you guys. It's amazing.
Got you. And even the coaches that we hired are both group practice owners. We help both of them with their group practices. One is now a 7-figure practice. And it's somebody that literally came to me making less money than what they would have made solo. And they were making like $15,000 or $20,000 a year while having a full caseload. Yeah,
I'm glad she got some help. That's good.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is such a great conversation. I'm so glad we got to catch up today.
Me too. This was super fun. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for all the advice and the encouragement. And yeah, like I said, be careful if you're going to go do any nether region sunning. Just, just keep that.
Here we go. We're going to do it.
We're gonna do it.
Call it the Woo scale, like the
right.
Yeah, scale of Woo, kind of like the Kinsey scale of like over time. I'm like,
yeah, right. Where is this gonna go? We're gonna do it as like
I don't know.
Right. We'll do it as like a team building activity at the group practice.
It's a beautiful thing. Just what do you do? I remember the first time I was watching something on Instagram, there was a guy like sitting in front of a window, like talking, and he's like, I'm sunning my testicles right now. And there's actually on PubMed, if you go into PubMed and the sunning of the testicles, it increases testosterone in men. So we actually have some data, of course, for men, not for women.
I love it. I think that's great. Like, take it away. Like, should he put on sunblock or like, I'm gonna have to look up the article because I just.
No, my naturopathic doctor, I'm just gonna go for it and say that my naturopathic doctor was like, you need to get sun and you need to sun your nipples in particular.
Really?
I know, there's some data. So she's like, here's the data, what that is. So I don't watch anything with Goop or with the other part of that, but I am, aware of some of these other pieces where I just go, I just don't know, but I'm the person that goes to Google Scholar and I'm like, tell me more.
Tell me more. Yeah, no, I'm all about it. And like I also want to be one of those people maybe who has like strong opinions loosely held, like prove me wrong.
Same.
Like I'm all about it. Prove me wrong. Yeah. I'll stick my boobs out a window every once in a while if that's going to make a difference. That's cool. Like up down. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, enjoy. I hope your neighbors do too. Yeah.
Much fun. This is so much fun. I can't wait to see you back in business school.
Oh, thank you.
For those of you listening, thank you so much for being here. You can go and find out more about this at zinnyme.com/podcast. You can see the show notes. We have free resources for you, over 10 hours of free training to help you get started. And of course, we have our business school for therapists that rocks. So until next time, y'all, just remember you are really desperately needed out there, and you deserve to be taken care of in this work.
And thank you, everybody listening, for your work.